Hello and welcome to this week's show. On today's show, we have an opportunity to hear from another highly successful doctor. His practice has operated at a high level for over 35 years with a highly diverse patient population. As he likes to say, people come in for lots of different reasons, and then they end up staying for maintenance and wellness care. He's a certified accident reconstructionist for auto accident cases and has testified as an expert many times. His office routinely sees between 900 and 1,000 regular patient visits per week, and he prides himself on his systems and procedures. And he's not alone in the office. He has 4 fantastic associate doctors who work with him, as well as an amazing staff. And we get to hear his keys of success right now. Hello and welcome to Secrets of My Success, part of For the Love of Chiropractic podcast series. On each episode, I'll be interviewing one highly successful doctor or business person, asking them what are their 3 keys of success or secrets they've used to make themselves so highly successful. So let's get started with today's show. I have the pleasure of having on the phone today a good friend of mine, wildly successful chiropractor, who practices up in Buffalo, New York, in upstate New York. My good friend, Dr. Dan Cox, is on the phone. Dan, are you there?
I am here, Robert. Thank you, and I greatly appreciate you having me on this wonderful podcast.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, and thank you for taking the time. So as we get started, I know our listeners, the only thing they know is the things that I mentioned in the intro. So I need to start from the beginning. How many years have you been in practice?
I'm in my 35th year. I graduated from Palmer in December of 1989.
That's awesome. And then, so what was your path? Why'd you become a chiropractor? How'd you get into chiropractic?
It's actually kind of an interesting story because my family, my grandparents were Irish immigrants. And when my uncle was probably about 3 or 4 years old, he had some sickness. I don't recall the exact pathology. And they took him to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician said, basically there's not much we can do, and just take them home and make them comfortable.
Wow.
And my grandmother had, there was a chiropractor in Lackawanna, New York, where I was born. And they called this chiropractor in, and he was working on my uncle. And at that point, at one point, the pediatrician showed up, and the chiropractor had to hide in the closet. So, so eventually, as you know, our profession came out of the closet, and it's been successful ever since. Yep. And so my father had cluster migraines, so he would go to the chiropractor once a month, maintenance care. So this was probably 1972-ish, and I would just go with him. And I unfortunately had headaches as well. So my parents had taken me to the pediatrician. There were no MRIs then. So I had my head shaved, and I had the remnants of the pads, the electrical pads on my forehead from the EEG that they did. And the chiropractor, as I sat there, asked my father, what's that stuff all over his head? My father said, oh, the poor kid gets headaches. And the chiropractor said, well, why don't you let me take a look at him? My father said, sure. So, I probably was adjusted for about 6 weeks intermittently, and the headaches were gone. And at 8 years old, I decided I wanted to be a chiropractor. That's it.
That's fabulous. Okay. So obviously went to college, went to Palmer. That was 35-ish years ago when you finished. And then when you got out of school, you associated or you opened right up? What'd you do?
Yes, I was actually the youngest chiropractor in New York State in 1990. And I was an independent contractor for a mentor of mine, Dr. Ali Jafari. And I did my preceptor with Ali. And then when I got out, I worked with him for 2 years. And, sometimes those relationships don't end as well as they start. And Ali and I are good friends today. But it was time for me to move on. So I took over a practice of like a country practice of a gentleman who was retiring, and he practiced for 40 years. Another great mentor, Dr. Dan Shears in Clarence, New York, and that's where I am to this day.
That's really cool. Now, it's funny, you said he practiced for over 40 years, and I'm sure back then you thought, oh man, Doc is old. It's time he gets out of here. But yet, here you and I are having practiced for over 30 years each also, and we don't feel old.
No. And, this gentleman was very youthful, and his conditioning was off the chart, even after a pretty catastrophic motorcycle crash. With chiropractic, he made an incredible recovery, and he retired at 64.
That's awesome. So let me ask you one of the questions that I love asking docs. Tell me what makes your office, your practice unique.
Well, I think it's a couple things, and I think at this point, it's systems and people. We're very systems driven, and most of our systems are functioning at a very high level, and sometimes they're not. The system is only going to be as good as the people.
Sure.
So if the people are working in their strength or their unique ability, as it said, the systems are usually executed successfully. Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of attracting the right people. I have been blessed to have been surrounded by great people. And I think one of the unique things in our practice is people stick around. I have an office manager who's my patient concierge, Michelle Copera, has been with me for over 13 years.
Wow.
And, she's kind of like a sister to me after all these years. Dr. Tom Scrates has been here for about 20. Franco, Corey, both here going on 10 years, my associates. So I like to think that we have a nice culture, even though at times it could be better. We're human. But I think to answer your question, it's systems and people.
So, all right. And I love that. So as promised, I had told you I was going to ask you, tell me about your 3 keys of success. So I don't know if we've already started to venture into that, but so what would you say your first key of success is, or have we already started to talk about it?
I think one of the main keys is systems. And I think before you actually get into your systems, though, you have to have, great clarity on what it is that you want. Like, what type of practice do I want? Do I want a wellness practice, a pediatric, a PI? And is it going to be an acute care model? Is it going to be, I want lifetime patients? So I think you can't be all things to all people. So you have to get clear on what it is that you want.
I love that.
And with that, and then with that in mind, you back into your systems. They use the term reverse engineer it. Mm-hmm. So you create a system that is going to support the desired outcome. And, you and I are, we wouldn't be where we are without Larry Markson. And, we learned the concept of be, do, and have from Larry. Mm-hmm. So once you're clear on what it is that you want to have, you have to do certain things. And that's where the systems come in. And so another important key, in my opinion, is basically consistency. And consistency comes from habits. And a lot of people are familiar with the book, The One Thing. And, I read a quote in The One Thing that stuck with me, and I'm going to paraphrase it. I may not quote it exact, but I remember the quote saying something to the effect that, you don't decide your future, you decide your habits, and your habits decide your future. So you think about what we do every day, from the side of the bed we get out on, and when we brush our teeth, the favorite coffee cup, whatever. These are habits. And when you're consistent with something and your focus and consistency is on your goal, there's no way you're not going to at least make incremental advancements towards the goal. So
So
Habits, consistency, clarity, systems, there's many keys.
all right. So let me ask you a question, because I want to sort of start to envelop this together, because you've talked about consistency, and I've known you for a lot of years, and you are one of the most disciplined people I know. You decide something and you move in that direction. I mean, without wavering. You are so dedicated. So when you talk about systems for the office, specifically, what do you mean? I mean, is it every little thing, or is it big concepts? What do you mean by that? Tell me what systems for the office means to you.
Systems means you have a shared vision. So I'm going to go back to clarity. So what is it that we want? Okay, we want to have, we want to serve a high volume of people, and you have to have specific targets. Like, what's the number? Not some vague vision. And then that vision, once it is shared with your team and they understand it, and you kind of onboard them with the vision, then they're going to understand why the systems are important. So as an example, and a lot of offices do this, we do a pre-shift huddle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like before the plane takes off, the captain is looking at their instruments, they're figuring everything out, where they're going. That's kind of what we do before every shift.
Love it.
And so we'll look at it, and if we identify, well, you know what, we're a little bit overbooked here, all hands on deck. So we want to know, like, what's in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that is a system. And then from there, there are the skills that you and I are familiar with called PVA skills. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of that's the do component in the be, do, have model. So if I want to have a wellness practice serving in our office like 950 visits a week, okay, in order for that to happen, it's got to be very efficient. So the systems have to be such that the scheduling is done a specific way. Each doctor is color coded. Each doctor has their own rooms. So it's predetermined. You don't just haphazardly show up. It's like the game is won in practice. You just show up to play the game.
I love what you just said. Now, you said something and you just so casually glanced over it. You said 950 visits a week.
Yes, that's where we are currently. And we set a goal to hit 1,000, which we did hit. I think we hit 1,007 about 2 months ago.
Fabulous.
And and it's a casual number because, I should rephrase it. That's how many people we served, not how many people we saw.
Sure.
And that number is going to change because, one of my human needs, there's 6 human needs that I learned from Tony Robbins, and one is contribution and the other one is growth. I like things to grow. I like to see growth either qualitatively or quantitatively. So that number of 950 today should be maybe 1,100 a year from now or 2 years from now. That hasn't been determined yet with our vision.
I love that. So you just brought up 2 questions in my mind. Number one, so you casually mentioned Tony Robbins, 6 important ones. Can you name the other ones? Or I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, no. I have them tattooed on my leg. Let me pull my leg. No. Number 1 is certainty. Number 2 is variety. Number 3 is significance. Number 4 is love and connection. Number 5 is contribution. And number 6 is growth.
Fabulous.
And knowing these human needs is important as a leader because not only do we have them, but our patients have them, but they have them in like a different hierarchy. Mm-hmm. I've known you for many years, and I know love and connection is big for you.
Absolutely. You're right.
You are a super connector. It's just like an innate quality that you have. So if you came in as a patient it would be real easy for me to connect with you in a genuine way, not in a seductive, try to BS somebody. And when you meet the human needs of someone, you're creating value, because that's what business and relationships are about. It's, I value you as my friend, and when you called me to do this, it was like non-negotiable. I'll do whatever you want, because the connection we have. Other people, it's certainty. You have a scared patient who comes in your office and, they heard they're going to have a stroke and you're going to have to go for the rest of your life, and all these myths. So that person is really in need of certainty. So if you can create certainty on that first visit and then continue it throughout the process, you're meeting that human need. That patient can become a lifetime patient and send everybody they know to you, but you have to try to meet the needs of people. And that's the same with our staff. They're not slaves. They're our team, they're our family, and we have to treat them such as, and we have to meet their needs, but you have to determine what their greatest human needs are.
Yeah, I love that. That is absolutely fabulous. So I want to double back again, one more question for the listeners. So again, you mentioned the $950 a week now, and you mentioned other doctors. So how many doctors total are there in your practice?
I have 4 associates and myself.
All right. So if you do simple math, on average, each doc is seeing about 250 of those 1,000 visits, round numbers.
Yeah, I would say on average, some doctors, I might have a doc that sees 300 one week and one sees 210, and, right. And it varies. I do most of the special appointments, the day 1, day 2, some, re-exams.
Sure.
And I adjust some people, but primarily I'm taking care of special appointments.
So what that means is, in your office, not only, have you perfected your systems and procedures, you've been able to so standardize it that the right doctor is part of your team, and they're able to step in and do that.
Yes, and I'm blessed. I was in a car accident in 2018. I ended up having a couple rotator surgeries, and I, ironically had to have my pisiform removed from this car accident. I think I wore it out from adjusting, really. So,
I like that better. I think so.
And I'm not even an upper cervical guy, but anyway. But 2 young associates, that Franco Marcello, Corey Evans, these guys stepped up, and I was out a total of 5 months, in recovery of these procedures. And, I'm so grateful to have these people in my life, and, having the habits and the systems that I have, and the fact that they were so eager to learn them. It was a good symbiotic relationship that we have.
All right. So I've got to ask a question that I ask every guest that I have on the podcast based on what you just said. So in today's world, can a young doc, or a doc who's less than successful than they really want to be, is it still possible to become a huge success today?
Oh, yeah, without question. Yeah, there's nothing different about today than it was when we got out of school as it relates to potential. A lot of things are different. The world's different. Insurance is different. Economies go up and down. Things change politically. If you're adaptable, you can be successful. When COVID came, everybody was really in fear mode, and it takes a leader to calm everybody down, starting with themselves, and then everybody in their sphere of influence, which was our team. And then from there, so you don't know. If you said to me, you're going to practice through a worldwide pandemic, I'd be like, you're out of your mind. But we did. So you just have to be adaptable. And as a young guy or gal coming out of school, you just have to have a vision of what you want but you have to work for it. I'll be honest, it is more of a challenge as a leader now, dealing with, millennial people, and, but the key is, as a leader, to be adaptable too.
Sure.
And to understand the thinking of the millennial. They have different values than we have.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be able to communicate and then, again, understand what their needs are. But if someone thinks that just because they have a vision, they're going to automatically achieve what they want to have, they're not. On a B level, back to the B, you have to be passionate, you have to be hardworking, you have to be disciplined, you have to be dedicated. No one's going to give it to you. And I've had some young associates come into my office, and they thought it was going to be given to them, and they learned that it just doesn't work that way, I'm afraid.
No, you can earn anything, but no one's going to give you anything.
No.
So, all right, you said something I've got to double back on for just a second, because I know you coach chiropractors personally, helping them to greater success. Obviously, I've done it over a bunch of years as well. One of the things that I saw during the COVID pandemic, because you talk about practicing through a worldwide pandemic, the chiropractors that were more subluxation based as opposed to pain based, the chiropractors that were subluxation based, their practices thrived through the pandemic. And offices that were more mechanistic and pain based really suffered. Did you observe the same thing?
Absolutely. And, and it's because of the focus. If somebody is, where did their fear come from? It came from, consuming media that we now know is, very inaccurate.
Right.
Whether it was intentional or not, well, I guess we'll find out soon. But, the mechanistic people, if you had a subluxation, or, if you said to a patient for over the last 20 years, do you think you're going to be healthier if your spine is free of subluxation and your nervous system is functioning optimally and your immune system in tandem with that? Do you think you're going to do better or not? And absolutely, those the mechanistic practices didn't do quite as well as the subluxation-based practices.
Yeah, there's a lesson in there. All right, Dan, I'm sorry, time is starting to run short. I've got to ask you two last questions. How would you define business success?
I think you have to define what success means to you personally. And for me, it was, to serve a large number of people and create a brand based on the outcome of that service. So again, two of my biggest human needs are contribution and growth. So if I set a goal, I would set something numeric. And if I achieved the goal, I would consider it to be successful. If I didn't achieve the goal, I didn't see myself as a failure. I evaluated what could have been different the next time around, and I just recalculated and back to the adaptability model and figured out what to do.
I love that.
And I'm 58, and I look at the world differently. As I mentioned, their values, or the hierarchy of values and needs are going to change based on where you are. So success to me now is to, see that I created something great in my practice. It's not as important as what I created in my family life.
Well, that's the final question. How do you define personal success?
Just to look at the family that you have. I've been married for 32 years to a wonderful woman. And and that anybody could say that, but the reality is, I wouldn't have the success that I have without my wife, Maris. She has been supportive through everything, good times, bad times, whatever. And, we had two beautiful daughters. My older daughter, Hannah, just got engaged. My younger daughter, Christina. Yeah, thank you. My younger daughter, Christina, she's a Reiki master. She does energy work. She's building her practice, and I'm excited to help her with that. And they're just great kids. And, they're well-rounded. They're hardworking. They have great values. And I give my wife most of the credit for that as well.
That's awesome. And I've met your wife, and I would have to give her most of the credit also.
See, I didn't lie.
Dr. Dan Cox, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your wisdom with us. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Robert, I love and appreciate you, my friend.
All right. Talk to you soon, buddy.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. And that's our show for today. If you have a question about today's show or your own practice, feel free to reach out at fortheloveofchiropractic.com. Before making changes to your practice, be sure to seek legal advice regarding those changes and regulations in your state. For the Love of Chiropractic is an RGF production, all rights reserved. And thanks for listening. Original music provided by Hunter Rich Music.